Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me just say, in my congressional district, virtually every synagogue now has armed security. Every mosque, when I go for Friday prayers, there's state police outside. And thankfully, law enforcement is doing everything it can. But this is an ever-present fear for everybody who is worshiping in New Jersey. And so these questions about resource allocation are absolutely legitimate. Let me begin with actually where the chairman started at the beginning, the question of cooperation with our allies around the world. Mr. McGarity, you talked about this as, yes, a transnational threat in the sense that these people are communicating online, but isn't it more than that? They're traveling, they're meeting each other. The shooter in Australia, in New Zealand, traveled to Europe and met people in similar groups. We have Americans going to Ukraine to fight for militias there, coming back with military training, joining neo-Nazi groups. My question to you, much more specific, if we can drill down on this intelligence sharing, is do you feel like you have the authorities with respect to sharing intelligence with our allies on members of neo-Nazi, white supremacist organizations, so-called domestic terrorists, that you have if, for example, an American citizen is chatting online with al-Qaeda in Yemen and then getting on a plane to Europe, in terms of contacting your counterparts in those law enforcement agencies so they can surveil, so they can contribute to our work?
If I have an open case on someone, it doesn't matter whether it's international terrorism, domestic terrorism, or criminal. I can share
Open case, yes, but you don't necessarily have an open case if someone hasn't done anything yet, right?
No, of course we do.
Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, if we have an open case where someone is looking, international terrorism, domestic terrorism, looking to do violence, right? Looking to do something. So what the Congresswoman said, plus looking to do violence, not just hate, but targeted hate, and I can open a case, I can share that information and work with my foreign counterparts, and we do that every day.
So despite the fact that we don't designate domestic groups, and I'm not suggesting we do,
right.
but
I can share that.
Are you suggesting you have essentially the same authorities with respect
to
to?
Yeah.
Okay,
we're
good.
working an investigation, and we would do a lead to that legal attaché office to share with the local counterparts. We may not get the same response,
Understood.
to be quite honest, depending upon the country.
Now, Ms. Newman, Mr. McGarity said at one point, well, several times, that he is focused on violence, not ideology, and I think that's probably the right answer from the FBI's point of view. But in terms of a national strategy for dealing with this threat, if violence is animated by ideology, isn't it important that we understand it, that we counter it, and above all, that nobody in a position of authority legitimize or echo that ideology?
Sir, the studies that have been done by the National Institute of Justice, by the Secret Services, INTAC, have identified that ideology is certainly one of about 5 components of an individual that's going to radicalize, but it is not significant enough that you have to know it in order to be able to see those behaviors and indicators of somebody on a pathway to committing an act of targeted violence, meaning you usually don't even discover what that ideology is or that motivation is before you might have clued in that somebody was trying to do something.
Okay,
now, this is specific to...
There are motivations here.
Yes.
And with regard to the white supremacist individuals and groups, that there is a belief that is driving those actions, a belief that white people are being replaced, that they are being threatened by something. And looking at the recent cases, isn't it fair to say that one of the common threads is that these people are animated by a conspiracy theory with regard to immigrants to America? I mean, they're all talking about it. Is that fair?
So I think that the current rise of white supremacy that we're seeing is abhorrent. I'm very sorry, Ms. Tlaib, at what you have endured. I believe that the prevention tools that we're trying to put in place will help identify those individuals as they're on their radicalization process. But that does not take away from the fact that we need to have a better understanding of every ideology that is posing a threat. That said, that's not my office's job. That's where
I understand. I'm
refer to the
asking based on your
community.
expertise. I mean, the shooter in Pittsburgh said explicitly he acted because immigrants were invading America. And he blamed Jewish Americans for abetting that because of Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. The shooter in Christchurch said immigrants were invading Western countries. This is a common thread. So let me just ask, all of you, from the perspective of people who are charged with dealing with this threat, is it helpful if in our public discourse in America, authoritative figures are themselves talking about immigrants invading the United States of America, threatening our way of life, threatening our culture? Does that not contribute to an environment in which these people who spout these conspiracy theories feel legitimized?
The gentleman's time is up, but did anyone want to take a shot at answering this question? Mr. McGarry.
I'll take a shot. So it's usually, it's never one sole issue, but there's certainly many. And with the internet, you can find whatever ideology you want to justify your action. I can leave it at that. And that's because we're seeing cross ideologies. In other words, there could be someone who's racially motivated violent extremist, but also their ideology might be anti-immigration. And then everyone's got a little bit different. We're seeing that more and more over the last couple of years than we did in years past, which were more stovepipe ideologies, if you will, more organized.
But you wouldn't want me echoing that ideology, would you? From my position as
Ms. Newman, did you want to answer that question?
Well, what I was going to suggest is that the fact that we live in a 24/7 news cycle now, the fact that the way that we get attention is through retweets and clicks, it leads us to more passionate rhetoric. And as government officials, our job is not to worry about the rhetoric or police the rhetoric. It does make our job harder, but the focus is on identifying the individual before they commit that act of violence and getting them the help that they need and hopefully being able to get them outside, hopefully to avoid the FBI having to investigate because we've gotten them the help they need to be able to see things clearly.